to elevate the resident experience, drive more property management efficiencies, and provide, that single pane of glass to, those main stakeholders in a building. Those are things that can be easily learned and trained up through an AI agent, which we have one called Rudy. 71% of all new renters into a building view technology as the number one amenity. 78% of renters stay in a building because of the technology experience. The operational efficiencies on the management side is pretty astounding. When you can connect everyone, every resident, and they're here, you can manage a lot. You can manage a lot more with less. I think if I had the work ethic I had now when I played hockey, maybe I would have made the NHL.
Welcome to MDU-Mic, conversations at the intersection of connectivity and community. And now your host, Michael McCourt.
Today I'm joined by Troy Crema, CEO and co-founder of Grata, SmartLiving super app for apartment communities. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. Pleasure to be here.
How would you describe Grata and what you do in an elevator pitch under a minute?
Well, we go by our tagline. Grata is essentially an all-in-one smart living platform, or just call it software platform for multifamily communities. And our bread and butter is creating the best digital experience for two main stakeholders in a building on mobile and web, which are residents and property managers. For us, we're a little bit differentiated is we integrate a variety of different technologies in a building into our platform, which include smart technology, locks, thermostats, leak detectors, access control security, so fob points, standalone doors, readers, elevators, intercom, but also tie in the other tenant engagement and property management feature sets like rental payments, work requests, booking mails, really bring that into one holistic mobile and web app experience for residents and managers that all seamlessly integrate with backend platforms. So that can be, Entrata, Yardi, and RealPage. But our goal, when we go into a building is to integrate a variety of different technologies to elevate the resident experience, drive more property management efficiencies, and provide, that single pane of glass to, those main stakeholders in a building.
Your website mentions that Grata was created for residents, by residents. I assume that resident might have been you.
Yeah, it was me, and it was also my co-founder, chairman, and father, Ken. We were both working in the USA at the time. I was living in an 8-unit walk-up. He was living in a first service run condominium down in Fort Lauderdale, and we were chopping rent on a low Class A multifamily building in Toronto, Canada, which is where we're originally from. And, long story short, both went north of the border. Pre-COVID, COVID hit, borders got shut down, and I got trapped with my dad for about 6 months, which definitely was an experience. But I guess two entrepreneurs under the same roof, we noticed really quickly, Mike, the resident experience on mobile really was pretty non-existent. And the bigger issues that we saw was that residents actually were not digitally connected to their property managers at all. And people were still operating off of paper notices, checks, keys and fobs, a lot of, labor intensive on-site, processes. And basically, I would say when even like pre-technology or pre-internet even processes. And, that just leads to, not as great as a resident experience that ultimately you would want as like from a digital platform. And so we just recognized really quickly that, the biggest pain point is that, property managers are not connected to the residents. And then we realized that, well, they're actually not connected to the residents because they're not adopted on existing digital platforms in the market. And our backgrounds are really in mobile. And so we said, well, the best way to connect with people is through their phone or their smartphone. And so if we could create an app, that residents would download when Mike signs his lease and use 5 to 15 times a day and have that really be an habitual part of his daily experiences living in his building, that's going to elevate adoption and engagement, which ultimately will allow property managers to finally be able to access their residents and manage digitally. And basically, over the last 5 years, Mike, we just kept adding more on that thesis of, driving engagement for not just the resident, but also the property manager through different, hardware integrations, software integrations to really, again, just keep elevating that digital experience. Because we kind of found, 5 years ago, it was kind of interesting. We kind of found that, people actually saw mobile apps as nice to have, I would say, for your building from a resident experience. And even just in the last year, we've actually seen it more of a necessity. And actually a necessity on a variety of different fronts. But the paradigm shift now from being trapped with my dad in, an apartment unit 6 years ago or 5 years ago now to, today is been quite a journey, that's for sure.
Demand for solutions like Grata limited to Class A buildings? What are you seeing across the industry in multifamily?
Yeah, so I mean, dovetailing off of my last point, it's been really interesting. We're doing a lot of work now with like city housing, community housing organizations, joint ventures, and it's really interesting. Like there was this whole perception that there's residents that don't have smartphones, residents that don't have mobile app experiences. And it might have been like one of every, it used to be one of every 100. Now it's like one of every, 200, 300 usually. And that applies to, I would say, most demographics, not just Class A, but also, affordable Class D, Class C, B, student housing, senior housing, et cetera. Everyone has a smartphone for the most part. There's always one or two that don't, but you need to have operational redundancies built in. So what I would say is, to answer your question directly, it's not. It's totally kind of shifted now, and people are looking at the mobile app or phone as really a security, layer for their properties. Keys and fobs get copied all the time. You don't know who accesses what, and so people want to do more so away with reoccurring hardware like keys, fobs, garage clickers, light windshield, light RFID readers, and go move towards more of a fully mobile, fully desktop digital solution to be able to manage the move in and move out of all of their different types of residents and renters, regardless if that's an A class asset, all the way to an affordable housing asset and kind of everything in between. And it's been something that we've just seen over the last 6 to 9 months of like this mobile first approach. And we have some, very innovative, I would say, partners now that are not even thinking about giving out keys and fobs. They're going full mobile around the building, tap your phone to every reader, unlock your door, have everything drive through there. And it's provided not just an elevated, convenience factor and resident experience, not just provided like more operational efficiencies because now you don't have to physically go there, credential fobs, give out keys, and you can manage the flows of your building. But it really has provided this amazing security layer, for the asset where you know exactly who accesses what door at what given time, which, now given, some government legislations in different states, like for example, like Florida with Maya's law, where you need a full ingress and egress log of every single point in your building. We just started to see that mobile first approach has, becoming more of a standard for really any asset class, Mike.
Troy, this sounds very doable for new build construction.
Yep.
To operators owners who have existing properties, what does that retrofit process look like?
It depends on the building. um, but I would say to bring your building to be mobile first, that's where you want to start. You need street to suite access, right? So very simply, the way we think about the world is how's your building operating today? And, what doors can I access through a key and fob? Okay, well, let's digitize the key and fob, right, for everyone. That's very simply how we look at the building. And to do that, you might need to upgrade, all the smart locks on the suite doors. You might need, because you might be running on a keyed system today. You might have, an access control system that's a little dated. We can still tie into that and integrate to that, but we'll basically evaluate the system and see if we need to upgrade the actual physical fob system or security system around the property. But it's really, having a knowledge and a wherewithal to make it really easy for property managers and asset owners of multifamily buildings to upgrade their buildings and provide those possibilities. And so for us, we started out in, rent controlled Toronto retrofitting buildings, which not sure if I'd ever do that again. We just didn't know anything about the industry. But we got to learn a lot about process, how to make residents feel comfortable with interacting with a smart lock and access control, and really understanding how within an interface, how are they going to have a seamless experience where they download the app, log in, and it's going to be something that they use and get right away, right? We have a term here at Grata called Uberish. Like we want to make that experience like native and really easy. But then it's also, property managers, they've managed the building for 20, 30 years on a certain way and system. How do you get them to feel comfortable? And so we realized pretty quickly that we have to build, a full service offering on retrofitting. We need to be able to come into a building, evaluate it really quickly to bring in that street to suite experience, provide, a full quote on all hardware, labor installation, and the software components to bring it up to code. And then when we sign, we got to go execute quick. So, we're kind of like an F1 pit crew here, like any city in North America. We'll have a team on the ground, certified low voltage installers, et cetera. And we're going, our record, I think, is 1,000 units in one day, where we drilled out, 1,000 locks, put 1,000 smart locks on, integrated the access control system, new digital intercom, and then brought this experience. So, it's knowing, kind of your process. It's having a really great platform to be able to execute on that process, because you can't have any delays. And then it's, building relationships across, hardware and, vendor installation teams across, North America and potentially even the world. And we have that ability through to essentially provide, we like to say one throat to choke, through the experience. Anyone has an issue, they call Grata, and we can go execute quickly, elevate that building really fast. So, when traditionally as retrofit's been seen as difficult, I don't want to say it's ever easy, but I think I think we do it the best in this space, just given our process.
Owner operator wants to move forward with Grata. What can they expect from you in terms of taking that F1 pit crew out on site and getting things done? What are some things, lessons learned when you're interacting with that property management group owner? How do you set this up for success?
Yeah, big question is, during the sales funnel on a given property, gather as much information as possible. And, the way we identify the world, the way we identify a building is kind of in three ways. It's software, hardware stack, which are the physical systems in the building, and Calix is of the world, the network side, right? Because the network will impact the hardware stack that you go, which then will impact the software experience, and they're all intertwined. And so we've gotten very familiar and I would say really good at understanding, network, as I think that's like a necessity to be able to deploy smart buildings effectively and create that seamless experience on the front end. So for us, it's, biggest questions is, gathering information on, what is actually in your buildings today. Do you have deadbolt doors? Do you have mortise doors where smart locks may go? What's the make, model, and SKU of your access control system? Do you have a fully integrated access control system head to toe? Like, do you have Salto locks on the doors with Salto based building running on space? So understanding, what is the hardware stack today? And then ultimately, what are the software systems that are running that hardware stack? Because we might just be able to integrate directly to it and bring that experience quickly. And then the third bucket is, really evaluating the network across the building, right? Because, if you have choice internet or preferred internet, you don't have bulk, you don't have managed, well, you might have areas of your building that are classified as dead spots. And then you might even have bulk buildings that have dead spots around the building that you didn't even know about. So we're all about, how can we bring the network up to, standard, that basically the standard that they're looking to bring in and create with Grata coming in the building. And so that's all information, Mike, that we gather, across what is the network, how is it operating today, and what is the hardware stack. And then from there, we have, great partners across North America to be able to like put out one bill. And once we sign up on that scope of work, we're going and we're deploying really quickly. But, the information gathering process is number one. Number two, it's property management backend PMS system integration. So what are you using? Are you using Entrata? Are you using Yardi? Are you using any of these systems? How are you using today? So it's always another question that I don't think a lot of providers ask property managers, because, someone might just be using, your backend PMS for accounting, and they're running, on another system for, other different things. So it's understanding what are their day-to-day operations today. How can we integrate to that? How can we do that integration to make that move-in process and flow of people seamless? But then how can we complement and personalize our onboarding experience so we don't disrupt, the day-to-day flows of what's currently happening with PMs? We're only enhancing it. And so that's things that we also do take a lot of pride in through the pre-boarding onboarding process. So really, by the time we get to site, Mike, we're integrated with the backend PMS. We understand the network stack of the building, all the hardware, we know exactly what we're doing. We've set literally a firm installation schedule with the property manager. We sent out notices to residents. We pre-marketed. Everyone's excited about Grata coming to the building. It's a good experience. And, we're able to, be prepared so we can so we can handle stuff that we're unprepared for, and, troubleshoot that on site and physically be there and go execute really fast on the ground. And then, the job doesn't end, because, after the fact, you're always going to have, 10, 15, 20 people that go, well, I was away on vacation, or, sorry, I was at work, or I wasn't there for this, or I didn't see the email 15 times that, was in your inbox. How do you tend to them? You got to have, AI support channels. You got to have, direct conduits through a support email line. And, you got to be there, I would say, for the property manager, really support them on a human to human connection. And so a big thing for us is, every property manager that we onboard, we make them feel really comfortable, but we want them to know that we're there all the time, 24/7, 365. after deployment when, things happen essentially in multifamily.
Troy, we've discussed the Calix SmartMDU solution and the dedicated IoT network purpose built for solutions like Grata.
Yeah.
In your opinion, how important is that broadband experience, great Wi-Fi across the building for multifamily in general and for Grata?
Well, it always depends on the client. Um, but if you're wanting to operate, I think a smart building moving forward, or even I would even not just define it as a smart building moving forward. If you want to operate an apartment building moving now forward, and now can be defined as a retrofit deployment of an older building or a new development, I think I believe it's a necessity. Grad has now become a necessity product to be able to manage buildings more effectively moving forward. To get there, a Calix multifamily smart building solution from a network perspective, as well as tying in different types of smart access, IoT, security hardware to power the software experience is also a necessity, because the amount of times I think we've seen, the SSID network that is being put in the building on a managed Wi-Fi network not have enough, broadband or power to be able to supply 4,000, 5,000 pieces of IoT on that network, and then it slows, the consumer network down. Having a partnership like Calix and having a partnership with other network providers across, Canada and the US, again, knowing what the front end experience is of what the impact is on the software with latency and, issues that might arise, we always want to be fast, quick, and efficient and provide that immediate, instantaneous experience. You need a great network system to power, that experience. Make sure your whole hardware stack is connected universally to that experience. And essentially you're able to, provide that amazing front end. So, in short, I believe, a Calix, Calix Smart Buildings, Grata solution, network, hardware, software stack moving forward from point of implementation, whether the point of implementation is on a building 30 years ago that you're doing today, or it's a new development into the future, it's the way to manage multifamily buildings moving forward. And we're not moving backwards. We're not going to keys and fobs. We're not going to reoccurring hardware. It's a mobile first type of solution. And to create, that mobile experience and be able to give that property managers that one single pane of glass, you need a great network partner that understands, how to put these systems in buildings, in a variety of different buildings. And you need a partner that actually knows how the hardware stack is going to connect to this network partner to create that universal, easy to use software experience.
Troy, once you deploy Grata and we're getting away from traditional keys, lockouts, things of that nature, how does it impact NOI?
It's just essentially, it allows you one, resident experience first. I think there was a stat the other day that came out. 71% of all new renters into a building view technology as the number one amenity. That when they actually go and lease up in a building, 78% of renters stay in a building because of the technology experience. So, if you want to talk about getting new renters into the door, staying competitive in the market, and then retaining your resident, everyone has a smartphone in their hand, Mike. So, we need to make sure that the mobile experience first thing, a device that they're using every single day is seamless and it connects them to their building. That's always the way we've looked at the world. So one, it should impact, your top line, rent growth, or, your vacancy, your occupancy rate should be higher with a better, mobile, tech savvy, convenient type of experience for the resident. Two is the operational efficiencies. I mean, you are saving on, reoccurring hardware like fobs, keys, garage flickers. With tariffs and everything happening in the world now, more expensive, harder to get on. Residents sometimes don't even want to pay for it. So some of our, asset owners, properties have been eating that cost historically. So that goes away. Three, it's, the operational efficiencies of the management side is pretty astounding. When you can connect everyone, every resident, and they're here, you can manage a lot. You can manage a lot more with less. So we've seen some property managers that we've worked with go from, managing not just one building with Grata, but managing 10 all under one, similar team. Right. And so to provide that scalability factor and the ability for now property managers to not just manage, one asset, but multiple, we've seen that just be a massive benefit. Obviously that leads back to NOI and, the balance sheet essentially at the end of the day. In the fourth fold, what's interesting, I think, for us now is given that we are heavy into security, heavy into, leak detection, water prevention, heavy into like insurance, I think what's really interesting now is a lot of the bigger insurance companies in the USA and in Canada are now seeing smart buildings be deemed as, a way to get your premiums down on your building insurance. So having a water detection or water prevention system, checks an insurance box that essentially, you have real-time monitoring or real-time shut off, which you can do to decrease your premiums. You're not paying, insurance is one of the biggest expenses for an asset owner when it comes to a building. So having, a system in place where your security is risen, check, where your leak detection and water prevention is risen, where your energy consumption is monitored, through thermostats, and where you have, this elevated digital experience, we are starting to see asset owners have the ability to go back to their insurers or find new insurers that, really see smart billing as a way to get your premiums down, which given insurance is, one of the top two costs for a building on an annual basis for owners, that's been pretty interesting to see as well.
Troy, if you were a property owner, operator looking at smart tech solutions and bring that into building operations, resident experiences, what are some of the questions you would ask of potential solution providers to make sure you're making the right decision?
W- What's your adoption rates on mobile for residents, and what are your daily active engagement rates? Like, I think that should always be the focus. It should not be on, if you have great adoption rates and you have really good engagement rates, the software interacts with the hardware well, which then in turn the hardware interacts with the network well, and it's a seamless, fast experience, right? So, the front end should always be what you're gauging first, because if the app is great and you adopt and you engage every day and it's high, well, you're connected to your resin, you're gonna be able to have operational efficiencies now and be able to, finally do more with less. The second question, I think a big mistake that owners make is they get really hung up on the hardware first. They try to go, I like that lock, or I like this system, and I like the way it functions. That's true. Like, and we're hardware agnostic, so we can integrate to a bunch of different types of net hardware stacks. But it's actually really like, okay, well, what's the price? What's the feature set of that lock? Like, are you future proofing your building? Do you have Bluetooth, NFC, Wi-Fi capabilities on that lock? Threefold, who are you actually, building your building for? Who did you cater to? Because what you put into a student housing building is different than what you put into, a Hilux, say, rental building from a hardware stack perspective. Software doesn't have to change, which is us, but it's different. What is the price point? And then, what are the other thing too is like, what are the service levels, right? Because, we kind of found is that, some areas and markets for certain hardware providers, it's a leading, smart lock, or it's a leading access control product because the service levels are so high, right? If I got an issue, I can get someone aside. I got a certified dealer, I got a certified installer in that area. We can troubleshoot that and tend to that support. Some markets, it might be the best hardware in the world, but your service levels are bad, so no one can essentially get back out to site and be able to do that. So, biggest thing is you should evaluate, one, the software experience first. Two, then you should evaluate the hardware on what exactly you want to put in. And then three, again, you should look at the network, because I feel like the network is just something that owners don't, it's kind of a fugazi for a building sometimes, right? Like, it's something that, like, I have it, but I don't know what I have, right? And I think that's where, like a Calix solution with a smart buildings and a Grata, that's where, like, it really can kind of tie into the fold. Because, frankly, I didn't understand networks when I was first starting in the business, but then all of a sudden I got really started to understand, because, it would impact, the experience on the front end for the software, which then also would impact, the hardware that was in the buildings. And so, when you're able to look at, a building and define it by those three ways, Mike, I think, those are the three things that ultimately any owner should be asking any vendor for smart buildings. Okay, what's your network? Well, one, tell me your software adoption engagement rates. Two, hardware stack. What hardware would you put into my building? Which then is, immediately tied to, tell me about your network. How does everything connect? What is, the matrix of all these devices and how the data gets back up to the cloud in real time? And, evaluate based on, those three different measures as well.
Troy, how has your vision for Grata evolved since 2023? And what impact is AI having in the industry?
We originally started Grata because we wanted to create an app that residents would use every day. That was it. And then, over the course of this journey, we've understood that, well, there's a lot more people that need that live in a building or access a building on a daily basis that interact with it, right? That could be, on the management side, that's, superintendents, maintenance workers, property managers, on-site security teams, off-site security teams, leasing teams, the list is pretty robust. So for us, we realized, over the last 2 years, our products evolved to not just a platform for residents, built by residents, but really a platform for everyone, for a building. And, we to be able to design and configure different types of skins within our, mobile app experiences for those different roles. So what a resident gets versus what a property manager gets is different. The accesses that a maintenance worker on site in one building gets versus a VP of maintenance that needs, access to 15 properties is different. And so being able to be flexible, agnostic, and a la carte, to interact with different systems, that has been an interesting, I would say a fun experience for us to kind of go through, because you need to be a platform that is so flexible across different types of property management styles, but also understand the hardware components of every single building, and also understand, how to easily put that into a front end interface. And then ultimately, how do you give that control back to the property manager in a very easy and efficient way to credential their different people, access, and assign different roles for certain people and make that seamless. And I think that's something, that we've gotten really good at. And we're still looking to, keep growing and understanding. Certain property managers have different requirements than others. They all are not the same. But the more that we can add into the platform and the more features we can build to turn certain things off to meet, their property management standards, that, seamlessly integrates with all the hardware on site through an interface, is something that, where we've really evolved. So, in one sentence, we're not just a platform for residents anymore in 2023. We're a platform for everyone, essentially, in your building. Everyone needs access. Everyone interacts with their, access systems, smart systems on a daily basis, sometimes across multiple buildings. We wanted to provide that interface on mobile and web for everyone, essentially, in the property. How does AI play into that? Well, yeah. So AI, it is part of our, initiative in our platform now. We use it a lot for resident inquiries and FAQs and training for property managers. It's really being used as a tool where, Mike moves in, he wants to know how to book an amenity. He wants to know how to, submit a service request. He wants to know, how do I unlock my door? Right? He shows up, what's this iPhone on the door? How do I unlock it? Right? So, those are stuff that are all FAQs, and those are things that can be easily learned and trained out through an AI agent, which we have one called Rudy, where we are immediately giving 24/7, 365 response times to that resident. But it's also linked to the hardware stack of the building, because obviously, like, I'm not gonna. How do I unlock my door? I'm not, if it's not pin enabled on the face of the smart lock, why am I regurgitating out instructions on a pin? So it's tied always to like every pieces of hardware that actually are implemented. And Rudy is that 24/7, 365 agent for the resident. The big thing too is, we saw a lot, property management turnover is a huge issue in buildings. We've seen times where, one property manager turns over every year, sometimes in some assets, right? So you're constantly hiring and bringing a new one, hiring. That's retraining for us. We wanted to be able to make retraining, training in general easy. So Rudy is also a support channel to train up property managers and staff more efficiently, and is also available 24/7, 365 to answer all the mundane, non-specialized type of questions until he starts to keep learning and, get more gathering from that. But, it's great for the resident. It's a huge tool for the property managers. What the impact of, like, AI in general on us. AI is great for platforms, which is what Grata is. So, when you're able to create AI, if it has no data to talk to, it's nothing. There's nothing. It doesn't mean anything, right? But if you're able to create this, layer and this digitized platform that everyone's using every day, constantly collecting information across, multiple buildings, that's literally data points that, Rudy or an AI, agent can learn and, start to put in natural language protocol models to, make it more smarter and make it more efficient. So, the impact of AI on the industry, it's only as good as the data. The data only lives on platforms that are really highly adopted and engaged. So, for us, we actually see us as a sounding board, really, for portfolios for AI. And, garbage in, garbage out. Your data has to stay, new. It's got to stay up to date. It's got to stay constantly inputted. Having people having a mobile app experience that they're constantly logging into, engaging with every day, moving in, moving out, and everything is staying up to date organically through access to the building as a huge trigger for that. We just see it as, the way to be able to, grow AI moving forward, not just in our industry, but, other industries as well.
Troy, do you have a favorite success story from a community using Grata?
The next one, always the next one. Um, I think for us, it's the fun part about this, which, maybe has not been so fun for, historically for other providers, is problem solving on site. Like, that's something that we take a lot of pride in. I mean, the amount of none of the newer, like if someone, it's always like the new partner that gives us the toughest building. And, I think we've built like, a really great culture here where we kind of like it. We understand. We've seen a lot. We've experienced a lot. How systems on site should interact within a digital experience to deliver that end product that someone bought by putting Grata in. But to get there, there's a lot of things that need to happen to create that experience. We're very good, going back to kind of our earlier question on capturing as much information up front, but there always are unknowns. So every single building that we do go implement on Grata, whether that's a new development, whether that's, a crazy big retrofit, whether it's, hey, I got a massive problem, my security system's failing, can you help me? We take a lot of pride in going in the ground, executing and building that relationship and bringing that solution. And the euphoric feature of seeing, a resident touch the app for the first time, see that experience, the euphoric relief of a property manager going, wow, I had so many problems and now here it all is in one beautiful dashboard and app and it all works. That's why we're always excited about, the next building that implements, regardless of the size. And, we understand that I would say every new client, it's always a risk to bring in a new vendor, but I think we make it a pretty great experience to do so.
Troy, now that we have the PropTech multifamily discussion out of the way, let's talk hockey for a moment. You grew up playing youth hockey in Canada. My boys play youth hockey in the Detroit area. And in our
Yep.
conversations, your former team used to play my son's current team. But
Yep.
what many people might not know about you is that of course, you graduated from Dartmouth, but your career took you all the way to the Division 1 level of hockey. How did your experience in youth sports and the competitive nature of hockey through the D1 level and beyond maybe impact your approach to business or life or otherwise?
I think if I had the work ethic I had now when I played hockey, maybe I would have made the NHL. But it's funny. I think athletes in general, it creates discipline. It creates, a regimented schedule. It creates, the ability to wake up and not feel your best, but still, perform. Those are all things I think I've experienced in Grata. Some days I wake up and I go, I feel like I can't move or I can't feel my face, or I've been knee deep on like, 70 or 80 calls. I always relate that back to hockey. Well, I've played with, eye ankle sprains. I've played with, gashes in my face, and I've played with, popping bursa sacs on my elbows and, all these different things. So like, I kind of look at that. It's kind of funny. You look back at that life and you go, well, I'm kind of soft now. Maybe, it's not that bad. I'll get up and I'll go to work and, we'll pay in the payment. But equally, I look at my work ethic now and I kind of look at my passion levels now. And, that's something that I always retrospectively look back in my athletic career. Cause, if I had the passion, which indirectly feels like, uncapped work ethic, to which I think if I had that for sports, when I was playing and had that, self-development and motivation back in my playing days, maybe I could have made it a little bit further. But, I think what's interesting is you really have to go through, as an entrepreneur, especially, you get tested every single day. You handle new challenges, new things that impact your life. That used to be things that, were really difficult for me, but now I kind of look at every new problem as something that you can meet head on, at center ice, face to face, to kind of use that analogy. And, with that, I understand there's going to be some pain and some growing points with every new challenge that you face. But if you're able to look at that pain as cardio, to kind of reflectively look back at hockey and, go, this is something that is good for me. And, it's only leading to growth and it's only making me a better, CEO, co-founder, indirectly, previously an athlete. that mindset of, temporary pain for long-term gain, I think is always something that, I've seen a lot of parallels between, not just my business career, but also my past hockey career.
Where can we find you online? More about Grata, more about you for those who want to connect with you.
Yeah, LinkedIn's always the best source, I would say. So, just look up, Troy, Crema, Crema at, I'm on LinkedIn. You can message me, DM me there. I try to get to it every day. Our website, we have multiple channels on there as well to connect, with me or my team members as well at Grata, www.grata.life. And yeah, hopefully, in one of your cities, you could also find us in one of your buildings. So, always love, getting to site, meeting people in person, new or existing, and, showing them that experience firsthand on what's possible for multifamily in their buildings.
Troy, thanks for joining the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.